Economy, economy, economy. We all know that economy is one of the compelling selling features of all American Motors cars. We all use economy and Rambler savings as part of our sales stories. But are we using them to the best advantage? There are many factors involved in savings and economy. Let's review them. The three major areas of savings are low first cost, high resale value, and low operating cost. The American Motors Economy Package. And we know that owning a Rambler can result in savings amounting to hundreds of dollars over the cost of owning a big gas-guzzling dinosaur. Yes, gasoline. That's what an owner thinks of first when he thinks of economy. He wants more miles for each gallon of gasoline. Low first cost and high resale value are important to him. They are savings that are realized at the time he buys the car and when he trades it. But gasoline is a continuous and sizable expense that occurs almost daily for the owner of a gas guzzler. And when a prospect comes to us looking for gasoline economy, we have a real story to tell him. We can tell him why American Motors cars are rightfully famous for economy of operation. What makes them that way? There's single unit construction, which results in a compact car with easy maneuverability. A car that's stronger but lighter. A car that needs less gasoline to push it around. There's good, efficient engine design, specifically engineered to provide top fuel economy under all operating conditions. And of course, there's the right carburetor for the job. A single throat for maximum economy, dual throat for improved performance with economy, and the 4-barrel carburetor which provides better breathing and more stable operation under all conditions. These are some of the many economy features that are built into every American Motors car. But there are several other factors that affect economy. Naturally, the condition of the car is important. A fouled spark plug which will not fire, or a dirty air cleaner which restricts air from entering the carburetor, waste fuel. Improper lubrication causes excessive friction, which results in greater fuel need. Underinflated tires also reduce mileage. All of these factors are robbers of economy. But there is another factor, another possible robber of economy who may waste gas. That's the man who drives the car. How does he drive? Is he a sensible, conservative driver, or does he have his foot in the carburetor? Does he roar away from every stoplight and screech to a stop at the next light? If he does these things, no amount of engineering can design a car that will give him economy. But for those who want economy, Rambler is the car. As you know, American Motors has gained its reputation as economy leader by many records established in competition. The 1956 Mobile Gas Economy Run, an average of 24.35 miles per gallon with automatic transmission. The all-time official NASCAR coast-to-coast record of 32.09 miles per gallon, and the official NASCAR border-to-border economy record of 33.93 miles per gallon. And the Rambler averaged 30.14 miles per gallon, traveling at an average speed of 55 miles an hour over turnpikes from Chicago to New York and return under the supervision of the Indiana Toll Road Commission. Of course, all of these records were set by Rambler 6, driven by professional drivers skilled in driving economically. In another economy run under competitive conditions, a Metropolitan 1200 series averaged 41.57 miles per gallon. The new 1500 series is capable of setting constant speed rates that are even more impressive. The Rambler American established a new cross-country record, Los Angeles to Miami, of 35.39 miles per gallon. In addition, many automotive magazines have proved Rambler's economy under their own careful test conditions. Let's take a look at how all our American Motors cars stack up against competition in the studies conducted by these independent magazines. These published reports show that Metropolitan, with its superior performance, offers economy comparable to the best of the other smaller imported cars. The Rambler American, providing greater room, comfort, and many convenience features and equipment, compares favorably with the economy of imported cars in its class, but offers mileage far in excess of most American-built cars. Rambler 6, the economy champion, gave an average of 17.3% more miles per gallon than the Ford 6, 15.8% more than the Chevrolet 6, and 27.7% more than the Plymouth 6. Rebel V8 tops other low-price V8s with 14.3% more miles per gallon than the Ford V8, 12.3% more than the Chevrolet V8, and 17.2% more than the Plymouth V8. The Ambassador gave, with top performance and economy per gallon, 27.9% more than Buick Century, 10.1% more than DeSoto Fire Sweep, 11.8% more than Dodge Custom Royal, 10.9% more than Edsel Corsair, 6.8% more than Mercury Monterey, and 12.7% more than the Olds Dynamic. In addition to all this ammunition on Rambler's superior economy, there are the following results of a survey conducted by an independent research organization among Rambler and Ford owners. Rambler 6 averaged 20.3 miles per gallon, Ford 6, 17.5. Rambler 8 averaged 17.4 miles per gallon, Ford 8, 14.2. And these are the figures given by the owners themselves. These figures compare with the results of actual field tests of owners' cars by American Motors engineers. No one can challenge our leadership in economy, and surveys also show motorists are demanding more economy. We have a proved selling appeal. So to capitalize on this advantage, it's up to us to sharpen our ability to sell economy. For example, when a prospect walks in and says,
"Is this the car that gets 30 miles to the gallon?"
how do you answer that question? Do you try to avoid it by saying,
"Well, sir, all of our cars get excellent mileage"?
or do you go at it like this?
Yes, sir, a car like this, equipped with overdrive and driven by a specially trained driver, did get 30 miles to the gallon. But tell me, what kind of mileage are you getting on your present car?
About 13 miles to the gallon.
Well, would you be happy with 50% more mileage out of every gallon of gasoline?
I sure would.
Isn't the second way better? With offhand answers, the salesman would merely mislead the prospect. But by spelling out that a certain Rambler with certain equipment and driven in a certain way did get 30 miles to the gallon, the salesman answers the question and avoids planting the misconception in the prospect's mind that he can get 30 miles to the gallon. And by asking what kind of mileage the prospect is getting on his present car, the salesman is then able to offer the prospect a realistic percentage of improvement with Rambler. After all, the prospect is interested in the economy he is going to get, not in mileage records set by drivers who were specially trained and under conditions different from those of everyday driving. You can also quote mileage figures from your satisfied customers. Again, this prevents the prospect from expecting unreasonable mileage per gallon. Even then, the prospect may want to be shown. He may want more proof that what you're saying will be true for him. This is your opportunity to give the prospect a driving demonstration of Rambler fuel economy. And here are the ideal sales tools: the Rambler fuel economy demonstration chart and the Kent Moore mileage tester. Used together, they will convince the doubting Thomas type of prospect and also show owners how they can get improved mileage from their Ramblers. The mileage tester permits the prospect to actually see and hear the results of his driving habits. The visible reservoir shows the prospect how fuel consumption increases with engine speed. The vacuum gauge indicates how fast starts and excessive acceleration waste precious gasoline. And as gasoline consumption goes up, a sound also tells the prospect that he, not the car, is wasting gasoline. Another important use of the tester is to test the mileage of the prospect's present car in order to point up actual Rambler economy. But, however it is used, this AMC-approved mileage tester adds to the impact of your economy story, a story backed by facts. The mileage records set in competitive runs, independent tests by automotive magazines, owners' testimonials, and the mileage tester. All of these facts will mean much more when you develop the confidence of the prospect. And one of the best ways to do this is to use the special booklet, More Mileage for Your Money, to explain to him how to drive the Rambler to get the optimum miles per gallon and how best to care for his Rambler so that it will continue to operate with maximum economy for him, and so that it will bring the usual high resale value when it comes time to buy another Rambler. As you know, a dollar doesn't go very far with most of the so-called low-price cars, but Metropolitan, American, Rambler 6, Rebel V8, and Ambassador continue to give the prospect the most possible comfort, quality, value, and economy for every dollar he spends. American Motors means more for Americans because it makes the dollar big.
Who is this man? Why is he important to you as Rambler salesman? And who is this woman? And why is she important to you? Husband and wife? Yes. Mom and dad? Yes. But why are they important to you? Because they are Mr. and Mrs. Prospect 1958. They are important because their characteristics and their motoring needs are typical of 3 out of 4 families who will buy a new car in the next 10 months. To know them, to know where they live, and how they use their car, is to know the needs of the great majority of families who make up your market. So right now, let's take a look at Mr. and Mrs. Prospect 1958. They enjoy a comfortable standard of living, live in an attractive neighborhood, and make most of their major purchases on credit. They have children who attend a school which is roughly 2 miles from their home. Dad is an active golfer, hunter, bowler, and like many other wonderfully adventurous people, an avid member of the Try It Yourself First Club. As a family, they enjoy frequent weekend picnic outings, and like most people, have the opportunity for one long vacation trip every year. On the working side of the ledger, we find that Dad drives several miles to his place of business about 5 days a week, while Mom makes about 2 trips a week to her shopping center some few miles away. This transportation, typically, is furnished by one car. It's 3 years old, and it's in our price class. But they plan on trading this car for a new one, and they plan on doing it this year. Now, why are these characteristics of Mr. and Mrs. Prospect important to you? They're important because, in some way, they determine or affect how Mr. and Mrs. Prospect use their car and what Mr. and Mrs. Prospect expect from their car. How does Dad use the car? Dad uses the car primarily for his daily trip to and from work, and occasionally for a longer trip out of town. What does he need from his car? Economy, small car handling ease, and big car comfort and convenience. But how about Mom? How does she use the car? Being a housewife and mother, Mom's driving is limited to shopping, visiting friends, and getting the children to school. That is, if Dad can get a ride with a coworker. So what does she need from her car? The same things as Dad. Economy, small car handling ease, and big car comfort and convenience. And of course, there's something they both want and are going to get this year. A brand new car. Will it be a Rambler? It should be, once we know where to find Mr. and Mrs. Prospect 1958 and how to sell them. What are the actual names and addresses of Mr. and Mrs. Prospect 1958, and where do we find them? Finding these people is comparatively easy. One of the oldest selling tools in the business is your competitive owner registration lists. These owners, combined with the names of American Motors owners on your Operation Postman list, represent your best prospect source. In addition, the friends and neighbors of your more recent buyers and the names you receive from your own business contacts and bird dogs are also excellent prospects. Why? Because Mr. and Mrs. Prospect actually are all the owners of 2, 3, and 4-year-old cars in your price class. These owners make up your most fertile market for 1958. Now, let's talk about how to sell them. As Rambler salesman, you know your 1958 product, its features, and its advantages. You also know who your best prospects are and what their motoring needs are. Your next step? Fit your product's advantages to your prospect's needs. Take salesman Jim Canfield, for example. Through preliminary qualifying, Jim has learned that one of his prospects, a Mr. Koenig, is a salesman for a local concern. He knows that Mr. Koenig spends 5 and sometimes 6 days a week driving the city streets. Let's see how Jim fits the product's advantages to the prospect's needs.
And Rambler has a number of other new advantages for 58, which you will really like, Mr. Koenig. As a traveler, aren't you interested in how much it costs to operate your car?
I sure am. I haven't been too concerned with my present car, but these new ones really eat up the gas, according to some of my friends, especially in city driving.
Not the Rambler, Mr. Koenig. Rambler's traditional penny-a-mile economy, lower upkeep, and high trade-in value mean that you could operate a Rambler from $150 to $450 less per year than comparably priced cars. That's economy you put in the bank, Mr. Koenig. And Rambler gives you economy in time, also.
Time? How do you mean?
Well, I imagine you have your share of fighting traffic and hunting for parking space.
That's my problem.
But it will not be your problem when you drive a 58 Rambler. Rambler's short turning radius, combined with steering ease, provides maneuverability for the easiest, quickest parking in America. Anti-friction bearings and wide front tread provide undreamed of steering ease. The Rambler slips into parking spaces that others pass up. You save time. Time that can be used profitably. And Rambler offers you still another big plus, Mr. Koenig. Being a salesman myself, I know how important a fresh, neat appearance is. Mr. Koenig, what's the inside of your car like after it's been parked in the sun for an hour?
Well, you know the answer to that one as well as I do.
I sure do. And I also know the solution. Rambler all-season air conditioning. Cools in the summer, heats in the winter, and ventilates and filters all year round. The 1958 Rambler.
Yes, Jim Canfield knows how to keep a sale moving toward a successful close. Fit the product's advantages to the prospect's needs. But we must remember that everyone's needs are personal. Do-it-yourself fans, for example, will be interested in such things as the power lock differential, self-cooling brakes, power saver fan, and the exclusive televac. To help sell these people, use your data book, your AMC prospect system, and your salesman's handbook inserts as guides to Rambler's 1958 advantages and benefits. Pre-planning such as this really pays off. Salesman Herb Sands knows the value of pre-planning. Herb makes a special point of knowing his prospect's needs and interests before he calls on them. For example, take prospect Hodges. Sure, Mr. Hodges has needs that are the same as almost any car owner, but he also has personal needs which Herb knows of and uses during the contact.
And besides all the fine advantages I've mentioned, Rambler gives you certain exclusives for your personal needs, Mr. Hodges. First, there's Rambler's single-unit construction, improved for 1958. No other comparably priced car has this feature. Traveling the side roads as much as you do, Mr. Hodges, can be mighty rough on a car, and not to mention the passengers. Single-unit construction is a real plus for sportsmen like yourself. And coupled with this is Rambler's exclusive full-dip process of thorough rust-proofing. Together, they assure long and trouble-free car life. And when you get to your favorite hunting spot, you can take advantage of another exclusive feature, Rambler's twin travel beds. You sleep in comfort and convenience, free from weather and hard ground, and there's no time and effort spent in setting up a tent and what have you. Any way you look at it, Mr. Hodges, Rambler's single-unit construction, full-dip rust-proofing, and twin travel beds are a combination with big benefits for an outdoorsman such as yourself. I have twin travel beds on my car outside. Come on out and I'll show you how convenient they are.
Yes, a different individual with different needs, but the selling technique remains the same. Know your prospect, know your product, and then fit the product's advantages to the prospect's needs. But you know, prospects are not only different as to needs, they're also different as to sex. And the little woman plays a big part in the decision to purchase a car. Now, what particular needs would she have? Well, she needs convenience. And this need can be satisfied with such things as Rambler's push-button transmission, step-on parking brake, power steering, power brakes, and power windows. She also needs comfort. Comfort which can be given by Rambler's all-season air conditioning, airliner reclining seats, and the new seat adjustment control. And last, but not least, you know that she needs appearance. The pleasing appearance that's afforded by Rambler's jet stream styling, tasteful upholstery combinations, and beautiful interior appointments. Yes, a woman needs these things. And salesman Tom Crisp knows this. So after satisfying the husband's needs, he presents those Rambler advantages which he knows will appeal to the wife. He's ready to present appearance and comfort now. So let's listen in.
Yes, Mr. Carson, the Ambassador by Rambler is the car for you in many ways. And by the same token, the Ambassador gives you, Mrs. Carson, the styling, comfort, and sense of luxury which is so much a part of our living today. This is truly a fashionable car. Notice the long, low sweep of line, which gives it that feeling of hidden motion. The Ambassador's Jetstream styling is the perfect blending of massive beauty and stylish simplicity, a combination which exactly fits the desires of people like yourself who want modern living at its finest. And as you discovered during the ride, Mrs. Carson, this combination is found inside the car, too. Big car room and luxury are yours the moment you set foot in the Ambassador. And remember, Mrs. Carson, the Ambassador for 1958 gives you everything larger cars have, plus one very important thing they don't have: handling ease. You'll have no more parking battles or long delays in heavy traffic. Fingertip driving is a fact with the Ambassador. In short, this exclusive combination of big car room and luxury and small car handling ease is made to order for those who want easy and gracious living. I know that you folks will appreciate this fine car more than any other.
Yes, Tom Crisp, you also practice and find successful the selling technique of fitting the product's advantages to the prospect's needs. And so will we all, if we remember to pre-plan our contacts in light of each individual prospect's needs and desires. And in our prospecting, let's not forget that smaller but rapidly growing market made up of two-car families. Their needs for a second car are often similar to the needs of a one-car family. Yes, you do have the product advantages to meet your prospect's needs. For whether it's a one-car, two-car, or multiple-car family, Rambler for 1958, the only car with the 7 better differences, the only car with the best of both, is the only car with the advantages that best fit today's driving needs. So select those prospects whose characteristics and needs place them in the market for a new car now. Select those Rambler advantages that best fit their needs, and then fit the product's advantages to the prospect's needs. If you do, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect 1958 will buy.
Motors Honor Club salesman. Bob likes to sell, and he's good at it. Good at it because when he fails to sell a prospect who should have bought, he tries to figure out why. With literally hundreds of different cars and even more people, all with different tastes, needs, and desires, he has to make sure he's trying to sell the right car to each prospect. And that, as you know, isn't as easy as it sounds. Bob's good at it because he knows the importance of taking the time to analyze everything he did with any prospect he failed to sell. Like any salesman, Bob is always disappointed when a prospect walks off the lot without buying. He doesn't like to be disappointed, and that's why he analyzes what he might have done wrong so he won't make the same mistakes again. Now, Bob knows he isn't going to find out anything surprising in analyzing his sales. He knows how to sell used cars. But it's always easy to be a little careless on certain details, which can be the reason for a lost sale. Right now, for example, he's going over the sales approach he should have used this morning.
Good morning, sir. Has anyone taken your order yet? No. I'm looking for a 55 Chevrolet sedan. I'm not trading anything, and I want the best cash deal you've got.
A 55 Chevrolet? Well, I'm sorry, but we sold the only 55 we had last night. Tell me, does it have to be a Chevrolet?
Absolutely.
I see. Incidentally, sir, my name is Bob Moran.
Mine's Franklin.
If I may ask, Mr. Franklin, why must it be a Chevrolet?
I've had 4 of them. They were all fine cars, and I just happened to like them.
Mr. Franklin, if you don't mind telling me, how much were you planning to pay for a nice, clean 55 Chevrolet?
Well, about $900.
Well, Mr. Franklin, for very little more, we can put you into this 56 Chevrolet sedan, one of the finest cars I've seen in a long time. Let's take a look at it.
That's the way Bob figured out he should have done it. Actually, he let the man get away because of overlooking a possibility that he knows as well as his own name. He didn't sell up. He tried instead to sell the prospect a 55 Dodge, a car the prospect wouldn't buy. The prospect wanted a Chevrolet or nothing, so he bought nothing from Bob. But you can bet that some salesmen sold Mr. Franklin another Chevrolet. And that's what makes it important to Bob, to do a little second guessing. It helps him improve his ability to sell the next prospect. Now let's take another look at how Bob analyzes why a prospect walks off the lot without buying. Most prospects want to buy. After all, not too many men are just killing time until their wives finish at the supermarket. Here's how Bob figured he should have handled a Mr. Claney.
Good afternoon, sir. May I show you any particular model?
Yes, I'm looking for a 1957 Buick.
Fine, I'm sure we have just what you're looking for. By the way, my name is Bob Moran.
My name is Claney.
Very glad to know you, Mr. Claney. Am I right in supposing you're driving a Buick now?
Yes, that's right.
And what year is it, Mr. Claney?
A 1953.
How long have you had your 53, Mr. Claney?
Oh, about a year now.
Is it all paid for?
Well, almost. I owe about $400 on it.
How do you like your Buick, Mr. Claney?
Very much. It's a nice running car. It's never let me down or caused me to be late to work since I've had it. But I want a later model.
Do you use your car mainly for going back and forth to work?
That's about the only chance I have to use it.
Now, isn't that a lot of car just to drive back and forth to work? I wonder if you've ever considered just how much money you could save if you owned a lighter car.
Well, no. You're talking about pennies, aren't you? At least that's the way most of that talk has always seemed to me.
Yes, Mr. Claney, I am talking about pennies. A lot of pennies. Pennies for every day and week you own the car. I can show you a car that will not only cost you less to buy, but a great deal less to operate and maintain over the period you will own it.
Well, I don't know. What did you have in mind?
Just step over here, Mr. Claney, and I can show you a car that will...
Well, it's probably pretty obvious why Bob decided he should have steered Mr. Claney away from the Buick. Unlike the man Bob should have sold up, Mr. Claney just couldn't afford a 1957 Buick. You probably had that figured for yourself. Mr. Claney owned a 1953 Buick, which he'd only owned for a year, so we know he bought it used. And he owes $400. That doesn't leave him much equity, does it? In other words, since Mr. Claney couldn't afford to buy the Buick, Bob should have tried to move him down to something he could afford. What did Bob actually do wrong? He took the prospect too literally. Since the prospect said what he wanted, a 1957 Buick, that's exactly what Bob tried to sell him. It was only after Bob had taken the time to sell the Buick to the hilt and had Mr. Claney in the closing room that he discovered the financial facts. Then it was too late to go back and try to sell Mr. Claney something else. Again, Bob had overlooked something he knew very well. Find out what the prospect can afford to buy early in the sale. But Bob does more than try to figure out why he lost a sale. He also analyzes his successful sales. He knows, as you know, that there is often as much to be learned from a right move as a wrong one. Let's take a look at one of these successful sales, the kind of sale you may come up against from time to time.
Good afternoon, sir. What can I sell you today?
Good afternoon. I'm looking for a car for about $500.
I see, Mr. By the way, my name is Bob Moran.
My name is Frank Keller.
Well, Mr. Keller, you want to spend about $500 for a car. What are you driving now?
A 57 Olds 98.
Then you aren't planning to trade your Oldsmobile.
That's right. I'm looking for a car for my wife.
Well, now, so that I can help you get the best possible car for your wife, I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Well, what do you want to know?
Do you have a large family, Mr. Keller?
No, we just have a 12-year-old daughter.
Do you believe there might be occasions when you would trade cars with your wife?
I hadn't given that much thought, but I suppose it'll probably happen.
Are there any other cars in your family, Mr. Keller?
No.
One other thing, Mr. Keller. Can your wife drive a car with a standard transmission?
Say, now, there's a question that hadn't even occurred to me. As a matter of fact, I'm not so sure she can.
Then you will want to make it an automatic shift. I have a car with power steering and power brakes. Women really appreciate things like that.
Maybe we had better think about having those things.
Well, in that case, Mr. Keller, I think this is just a car for your wife. It's in beautiful condition. It's dependable, too. It'll run a little more than you said you wanted to spend, but I think you'll agree.
I think we can all agree that Bob did a good job of qualifying that prospect. Bob could have been wrong by assuming Mr. Keller would not have any trouble financially, but we can't argue with success. Bob finally sold him a car, not for $500, but for $11.95. How? Well, by asking questions. When he asked whether Mr. Keller would be trading cars with his wife, he caused Mr. Keller to realize that he would have to be proud of whatever car he bought. This made it easier for Bob to sell up. He talked about power equipment and moved up a few more notches when Mr. Keller acknowledged that he would like to have them. He was fairly sure he would, since he could assume that Mr. Keller's 98 would have power equipment. Yes, Bob does a lot of things that most of you do, things that are basic to selling. In each of the cases we've reviewed, he met the prospect immediately. He was polite, friendly, courteous, and confident. And of course, he always does his best to get off to a good start with the prospect. First impressions may not be accurate, but every prospect's decision to buy or not is influenced by these first impressions. And just as in new car selling, the close is in the selling every step of the way, particularly in the beginning. Bob sets out to convince each prospect that he is sincerely interested in helping him select the car that is best for him. And he does this not only by what he says, but by how he says it. His appearance and attitude go a long way toward creating a favorable impression on the prospect. Then, to add to that impression, he asks questions and listens carefully to what the prospect says, so he can learn what the prospect believes he wants. With this information, he can fit his sales story to a car the prospect can and will buy. With all the cars he has to sell, Bob knows it is all too easy to waste his time and the prospect's time trying to sell a car the prospect can't or won't buy. Let's watch Bob in action again as he tries to make certain that he is concentrating on the right car.
Good morning, sir. I'm Bob Moran. What can I show you today?
My name is Kelly. How much is this car?
I'll check on that for you, but I know we can make you a fine deal. Are you interested in this particular car?
Well, I can't know that until I know the price.
I would like to look it up to be sure, but it ought to be somewhere around $16.95.
And how much is this one here?
Well, Mr. Kelly, all of our cars are priced to sell quickly. If you'll give me some idea as to just about what you're interested in, I'm certain we can pick out a car and a deal that will please you. What kind of a car are you driving now, Mr. Kelly?
I'm driving a 1954 Ford sedan.
In a few minutes and with a few questions, Bob learns that Mr. Kelly has a 54 Ford, that it is paid for, that he's going to trade it, and that he's thinking of spending about $900 difference. With that information, Bob can direct Mr. Kelly to a car without wasting a lot of time wandering all over the lot. He is able to focus Mr. Kelly's interest on one car, a car that fits Mr. Kelly's needs and desires, a car that he can concentrate on selling without quoting a price. And then, in answer to Mr. Kelly's question,
what would the monthly payments run on this car?
Well, let's go into the office, Mr. Kelly, and we can figure it out down to the last penny.
Having focused Mr. Kelly's attention on the car and having sold the car, not price, Bob wants to leave the car to get away from any possible distractions. Now is the time to focus the prospect's full attention on allowance and monthly payments. We can all agree that everything Bob did added to his chances of selling the car to Mr. Kelly. And that's the way he works with every prospect. Bob starts building toward his close from the very beginning by gaining the prospect's confidence. Also, Bob knows, as you know, that the selling process is not just talk, not just a pitch. It's careful questioning and listening to find out what the prospect wants and how best to go about selling him. Think back. How many times have you tried to sell a car to a man that he couldn't or wouldn't buy? Why not go back and analyze those situations? Why not make certain you never make the same mistakes again? Remember, taking the time to analyze everything you do in every sale is the surest way to improve your selling process. The surest way to more and more sales.
These are the enemy. Up to now, the 3 largest selling cars in America. But you can change this. The owners of these cars are your targets. They are your surest source of prospective sales. Your object? To make conquest sales, to convert these competitive owners to Rambler. Your weapons? The all-new Ramblers for 1958. These weapons give you an edge on competition with exclusive advantages. The only automobiles which offer the better differences and the best of both. Big car roominess and comfort with small car economy and handling ease. There's a growing reaction on the part of car buyers against the Ford, Chevrolet, and Plymouth trend toward longer, wider, more expensive, overpowered automobiles. Against automobiles which cost more and more to buy, more to insure, more to repair, and more to keep supplied with oceans of gasoline. But to take full advantage of this reaction, we have to get out there and fight to win over competitive owners of Fords, Chevrolets, and Plymouths. So to make this year the most profitable for you and the biggest for Rambler, let's all carry a chip. Let's challenge competition. Let's dare them to compare. Let's stand up for the superiority of Rambler, a superiority proved by our owner loyalty. 51.2% of our trades are from satisfied American Motors owners. They are, of course, our best source of prospects. But 24.3% of our trades are Fords, Chevrolets, and Plymouths. People who are reacting against the too big, too expensive transportation offered by most of the industry. 75.5% of all cars traded to you are American Motors products and products of the so-called low price 3, of which 83.8% are traded for the Rambler 6, rightfully famous for its penny-a-mile economy in this day of gas-guzzling dinosaurs. 1957 saw Rambler sales go up 35%, breaking all sales records. The time is right to swing more and more competitive owners to Rambler. So carry a chip, challenge competition, dare them to compare. Rambler has the advantage, and you can prove it. Rambler's hard-hitting advertising program helps to pre-sell your prospects. It highlights the differences that make Rambler better. It tells prospects how their needs will be filled best by the best of both. And your X-ray book is filled with facts to help you back up that advertising. It helps you prove that only Rambler gives you the finest features of the finest cars. It stresses Rambler's fresh, distinctive Jetstream styling, featuring a low hood, smooth roof, and flat rear deck. Single unit construction, all welded, twice as strong and safer too. A method pioneered by American Motors, now being adopted by Lincoln, Continental, and Thunderbird. Plus, deep dip. Each body is immersed in a tank of paint primer to assure better rust protection, the nearest thing to a lifetime car body. The best of both, American big car room, ride, and comfort, European small car economy and handling ease. Best in economy, penny-a-mile economy, official NASCAR record set by the Rambler 6 with overdrive. Shortest turning diameter, easiest, quickest parking in America. Airliner reclining seats and twin travel beds, and lower cost, more efficient, all-season air conditioning. But you'll need some more powerful ammunition, a point-by-point comparison of Rambler with competition. You'll need, and you have, an answer for every objection. An answer you can give at the drop of the chip you're going to carry this year. Let's compare prices first. Model for model, Rambler is priced lower than the low price 3. Based on the published, advertised, delivered price, the Rambler Economy 6 has a price advantage which is $62 less than the Ford Custom 300 6, $108 less than the Chevrolet Del Rey 6, and $122 less than the Plymouth Plaza 6. Then, one step up, the Rambler Rebel Super costs $56.84 less than the Ford Fairlane 8, $55 less than the Chevrolet Biscayne 8, and $70.50 less than the Plymouth Savoy 8. Still another step up. The Rambler Rebel Custom costs $94.56 less than the Fairlane 500 8, $90 less than the Bel Air 8, and $90.25 less than the Belvedere 8. So, if price is of serious importance to the prospect, add it all up. Rambler is the winner, hands down, all across the board. It costs less to buy, less to operate, and it brings top resale value too. This price advantage is of particular importance because of the unusual size of American Motors' market. American Motors products cover 88% of the volume market. This means you can always sell up or down to suit the buyer's needs and at a price to fit his budget. But let's see how comparative information can help you make more conquest sales. For example, what about small car handling ease? For easy parking, the Rambler 108-inch is 10.9 inches shorter than the Ford Custom 300, 15.9 inches shorter than the Fairlanes, 18 inches shorter than Chevrolet, and 14.9 inches shorter than Plymouth. And 108-inch Rambler's nimbleness in traffic is made possible by its shorter wheelbase, 8 inches shorter than the Ford Custom 300, 10 inches shorter than the Fairlanes, 9.5 inches shorter than Chevrolet, and 10 inches shorter than Plymouth. The turning diameter for the Rambler Economy 6, the shortest in the industry, except for the Rambler American, is 2.8 feet smaller than Ford, 0.2 of a foot smaller than Chevrolet, and 5 full feet smaller than Plymouth. Aren't those the kinds of facts that go a long way toward convincing a prospect that driving and parking needn't be a chore, but can actually be fun with Rambler? What about the other part of the story? Big car room. Here are the facts. Hard-hitting, selling facts. All of Rambler's interior dimensions compare favorably with Ford, Chevrolet, and Plymouth. For example, Rambler's front and rear headroom exceeds Ford, Chevrolet, and Plymouth. This is a real selling story for Rambler. Without an oversized exterior, it provides as much or more passenger room than many cars of far greater size and weight. That takes care of the facts for big car room. What about big car comfort? First, let's look at competition. Ford has coil springs in the front only, leaf springs in the rear. Also, Ford's Hotchkiss drive forces the rear leaf springs to fill the dual role of absorbing driving forces and cushioning the car against bumps. But when the rear springs are controlling the driving forces, they can't fully absorb the bumps of rough roads. Consequently, the Ford ride is harsh and rough. Chevrolet has set the body above the frame on front coil springs that are shorter and which result in a rough ride. Plymouth has torsion bars in front and leaf springs in the rear. Because of their different rates of deflection, this results in the front end riding hard while the rear wheels ride softly. Only Rambler, with its deep coil ride, gives true big car comfort. These longer, softer, direct-acting coil springs are mounted above the center of gravity, giving the Rambler greater road-hugging characteristics. Also, these deep coils are widely spaced, which helps to reduce side sway on turns or in strong crosswinds. And Rambler's more expensive torque tube drive absorbs the driving thrust of the rear wheels through the heavy track bar, radius rods, and torque tube, and dampens the harsh driving thrust to the rigid single-unit body. With these driving forces under control at all times, the rear coil springs have only one function: to effectively absorb bumps and give Rambler a soft yet firmly controlled ride, the best ride in the industry. What about frames? Ford uses the old-fashioned bolted-on body and front end assembly, a method that assures body bolt squeaks and rattles. Chevrolet uses a wasp waist frame and bolts the body to it with the same squeaking result. Plymouth uses a so-called ladder-type frame with the bolted-on body, and you know the results. Only Rambler gives single-unit construction, a single unit made up of 8,000 welds, welds which form sheet metal into strong box-section girders that are lighter, stronger, and infinitely safer. And of course, there's lifelong freedom from body bolt rattles and squeaks. What about engine performance? Well, Rambler's Economy 6 provides a higher compression ratio than any of the 6s made by the low-price 3. This means that Rambler squeezes more go from every drop of fuel. The displacement of Rambler's Economy 6 is 195.6 cubic inches, 27.4 cubic inches less than Ford, 39.9 cubic inches less than Chevrolet, and 34.4 cubic inches less than Plymouth, which means simply that Rambler has a smaller, more efficient engine design. And because of the smaller displacement, the fuel economy is greatly improved. Rambler's Rebel V8 engine develops more horsepower per cubic inch than any of the standard V8s in the low-price 3. And as for the real measure of performance, pounds of car weight per horsepower, Rambler Rebel leads the way with only 15.8 pounds per horsepower. Ford has 17, Chevrolet 19.44, and Plymouth has 15.84. The Rambler Rebel V8 with its short piston stroke, which reduces engine wear, its heavier crankshaft, deeper block construction, and rugged basic design stands out as a superior performer in every way, except perhaps for the new Ambassador V8 engine, which gives top performance with economy. A 327 cubic inch engine, it develops 270 horsepower and delivers 360 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels at 2,600 RPM. This is the engine that is in the new Ambassador by Rambler. Up to this point, we've talked of the conquest sales of owners of the Low Price 3. But the upper end of the Low Price 3 extends well into the medium price group. And this general area contains the prospects for Ambassador by Rambler. Just 9 inches longer than Rambler, it is the ideal automobile for those buyers who want a slightly larger but sensibly sized automobile. And in quality and luxury, it stands second to none. The advertised delivered price of the Ambassador Super is just slightly more than a Ford Fairlane 500, but it is $250 less than an Olds 88, $232 less than a DeSoto Fire Sweep, and $113 less than a Buick Special. The medium-priced car owner can step into Ambassador and gain prestige while he saves money. And an owner of a low price 3 can step up to Ambassador for very little more money. Yes, as we said earlier, these are the enemy. They're big, and their cars are big. Too big. We can and will meet and beat them on every point they dare to compare. Owners of these cars are prime prospects for conquest sales. These are the people to whom we want to sell Rambler. There are millions of them. Their cars are big, awkward, expensive gas guzzlers. They will welcome the compactness and economy of Rambler. And these are the cars, the weapons we're going to beat them with. The Rambler 6, Rebel V8, and Ambassador by Rambler. We've talked about points of comparison so far, but there are many, many points which can't be compared because they're exclusive with Rambler. Aluminum window frames, which, in addition to being neater and smarter looking, put an end to rust and corrosion. Double-sealed doors, which provide a barrier against wind and moisture, keeping passengers comfortable winter and summer. Squeeze-type door handles to provide fingertip opening ease with either hand. A single-unit die-cast grill, which prevents rattle and eliminates noise and rust out. Dual ashtrays for the safety and convenience of the driver and front seat passengers. Twin travel beds for the overnight traveler, sportsman, or vacationer. The luxurious comfort and convenience of airliner reclining seats, which permit the front seat passenger to relax or catch a quick nap or sleep in quiet, relaxed comfort. And there are many more exclusive with Rambler sales advantages. Adding together all of these advantages, plus the competitive superiority of Rambler, plus the disregard of most manufacturers for the public's desire for a smaller, more economical car, it's easy to see that this is the year to carry a chip, the year to go out and convert Big Three owners to Rambler. And as you know, it isn't enough just to know Rambler. You have to know their sales points, too. Your most effective weapon is the comparative information in your X-ray book, strengthened point by your product analysis reports. Take the facts in these reports and weave them into your own sales approach. Use your 1958 X-ray book. Study it carefully and know how to use it most effectively with your prospects. These two weapons, the X-ray book and the product analysis reports, are vital to your efforts to increase the number of conquest sales. Use them consistently, use them often, and remember to carry a chip so that this can be your biggest sales year yet. Let's all get out there and make 1958 the biggest year yet for Rambler.
then, gentlemen, we're going to discuss how you Honor Club officers go about closing the sale, what that means to you, and the kind of problems you have to deal with. Let's start with you, Elmer. Elmer Blurt. As the world's lowest pressure salesman, you've been going great guns. How about letting the rest of us in on your secret for closing so many sales?
Well, the fact of the matter is I don't have a secret. I don't really sell or close sales. People just buy. Sometimes it's downright discouraging. People keep buying the new Rambler before I can give my sales talk.
I can imagine how you must feel, Elmer, being such a ball of fire salesman. But somehow I don't think you're very typical. What about the rest of you? Joe, what do you think is the best way to close a sale?
Well, Ed, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't any best way. Every customer is different. So the way I go about closing has to be different, too. To talk about the close as if it is separate from the other things we do just doesn't ring a bell with me. The way I look at it, I'm closing from the minute I start talking to a prospect.
Why don't you tell us just what you mean by that, Joe?
Well, to sell a man, you have to know something about him. How he thinks, what he wants in a car. If I don't know these things, I may never close the sale. But when I know them, I can talk to him about the things he wants to talk about. I can give him reasons why Rambler will best fill the bill for him.
In other words, Joe, you feel that the basis for the close has to be formed in the beginning by finding out what the prospect wants so you can talk in terms of his interests. Yes. Now, gentlemen, can we all agree with that? Good. Now, Joe, suppose you tell us how you go about starting the sale right.
Well, it's pretty basic. I'm sure everyone here knows about it. But here goes. When a prospect walks into the showroom, the first thing I do is walk up to him and... Good afternoon, sir. My name is Joe Barnes. May I help you, Mr.
Knight, George Knight.
Mr. Knight. Say, I believe I know a Frank Knight. He lives on the west side. Do you happen to live near him?
No, I live on Pearl Street.
Oh, I live in that section of town, too. Well, Mr. Knight, what particular model Rambler were you interested in?
I'd like to see the one that has penny a mile economy. My gasoline bills have climbed clear out of sight.
Oh? What kind of car are you driving now, Mr. Knight?
A 56 Bel Air hardtop.
Then you're interested in the Economy 6. And believe me, it will really cut those gas bills down to size. Were you interested in the station wagon?
No, I'd like to look at a sedan.
Fine, Mr. Knight. Just come with me and we can look at one over here I'm certain you'll like. And at that point, I know something about what Mr. Knight wants. And therefore, what to start talking about when I present the Rambler.
Do you have any problem getting prospects to give you their names and addresses?
Oh, once in a great while, but there's usually no problem. It's pretty tough for a man not to give you the information you ask for when you make it easy for him by giving him your name. And once I have his name on the order form...
On the order form?
Why, sure. I start right out with that in my hand. I guess it's an old technique. You know, it gets a man used to seeing it. I use the back of the order form for all the notes, figuring, and doodling I do while I'm selling a prospect. Some of it can come in very handy if a question comes up later about what was said. At any rate, once I have his name, I can use it all the time I'm talking to him. It puts us on a more friendly basis. And if he does walk out without buying, I can follow up, because I have his name and address.
Then you wouldn't advise giving up just because a prospect walks out without buying?
No, absolutely not. As soon as possible, I go back over every step of what I did and try to find out where I took the wrong approach. Then I call him or go out and see him and try a new approach.
Joe, if you had to pick a single important reason why you have failed to close some prospects, what would it be?
Well, this is strictly personal, but I figure that whenever I fail to close a sale, I just didn't size the prospect up right when he came in. Somehow or other, I didn't learn his real interests. I was pushing all the wrong buttons. That's why I always try to get every prospect's name and address. I figure that the second time around, I'm going to find the right button and make the sale.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bill, how do you feel about what Joe's been saying?
Well, Ed, no one can argue that it's important to get the prospect's name and address, and to find out as much as you can about him so you can talk about what he wants.
How would you say that, generally, you go about closing a sale?
Well, although I agree with Joe that every prospect is different, I think I do follow a general pattern. I've never tried to label the way I do it, but I think you could call it closing in pieces. In other words, after I've discovered just about what the prospect wants, I begin to feed him a lot of simple little questions about what he would like to have in his Rambler. For example, when I'm talking about the paint, I'll ask him what color he'd like to have, and I make a note of it. When I'm talking about power steering or power brakes, I always ask him if he would like to have them on his Rambler. When I'm talking about push-button driving, I ask him if he would like to have that on his Rambler. In other words, during every step of my presentation, Ed, I'm trying to find out what he is interested in and what he would like to have on his Rambler. And I feel that after he's made all these easy decisions, it's easier for him to say yes when I ask for the order. And even there, I try to make it easy. When would you like to have delivery of your Rambler? Or how do you prefer to pay for your Rambler? Are a couple of questions I use. And I never say or do anything that would indicate any doubt in my mind that he is going to buy.
All right, Bill, what do you do if he answers one of these easy questions with, well, I'm not sure whether I'm going to buy?
I always take that opportunity to go back and review the parts of my presentation that seem to interest him. I especially stress any features he has indicated he would like to have in his Rambler. This helps to put him back in the right frame of mind. I try to keep him thinking about his new Rambler and how he wants it. After all, he wants a new car, or he wouldn't have come in. But he can still think of a lot of reasons not to buy, if I give him a chance. So the more little decisions he makes about what he wants in his new Rambler, the more clearly he can see himself in it, and the more determined he becomes to buy a new Rambler.
Very good points, Bill. Now then, suppose we take a minute or two to see what we've covered so far. Now, Joe brought out that actually the close begins at the start. That you're far more likely to close if you find out as much as possible about the prospect and tailor your presentation to him. Joe also stressed how important it is to get the name and address of every prospect. And he told us a very good technique. Using the order form to make all your notes on. Now then, Bill brought out what he called closing in pieces. Maybe we could call that building the close on a lot of little decisions. In other words, Bill tries to close over and over again. And along with that is reviewing the presentation whenever the prospect hesitates or indicates a doubt about buying. All right, now let's go on with some of the reasons prospects are giving you for not wanting to buy. Jim, how do you handle a prospect who says he wants to think about it for a while?
Well, Ed, I try to find out what's causing him to hesitate. There must be a reason of some sort, and unless I can find out what it is, I may not be able to sell him.
Just how do you go about trying to find out why he is hesitating, Jim?
Of course, there are a number of ways to go about it, but I had a prospect just the other day who said he wanted to think about it. Now, the way I handled that was...
Yes, I like the car, but I'd like to take some time to think about it.
May I ask you, Mr. Hooker, whether there is anything about the Rambler that I didn't make clear, or perhaps failed to cover?
No, it isn't that. I'm just not sure that I'm ready to make the move.
Well, Mr. Hooker, here are some factors I'm sure you'll want to consider. Your present car will never be worth as much as it is right now. By buying now, you'll save the money it will depreciate in a short time. And the sooner you get into your Rambler, the sooner you can start saving money on gasoline. And the sooner you can start enjoying the pleasure of driving your new Rambler. Also, your present car may develop some kind of mechanical trouble, which could mean we might have to refigure the deal. Yes, sir, Mr. Hooker, from the standpoint of the best possible deal for you, now is the time to buy. Would you like to take another look and see?
And did he buy?
Yes, but only after I reviewed the presentation, Ed, stressing the features he was interested in, and went over the appraisal of his car again.
What would you have done if he had insisted on taking a week or so to think it over?
I'd have waited a day or so, and then I'd have gone out to see him at his home.
What kind of approach do you think you might have used?
That's pretty hard to say, but I might have taken the tack that I admire a man who gives careful thought to the purchase of a car, and that I was sure he would like to have another ride in the Rambler. Then I'd have made another presentation and ended with, "Now is the best time to buy." Once he saw the new Rambler parked in his drive, I'm certain he would have bought.
One more question, Jim. What would you have done if the prospect had said, "I want to talk it over with my wife"?
If that comes up, Ed, I usually say something like, "I think that's a fine idea. If she's at home now, I'd be glad to drive you there so that she can have an opportunity to see and ride in the Rambler."
And what kind of reaction do you usually get to that offer, Jim?
Well, if the prospect really wants to talk it over with his wife, he usually accepts the offer. If he backs away, then I'm pretty sure he has some other reason for hesitating, and I try to find out what it is.
What do you do if you just can't seem to put your finger on the reason for his hesitation?
Well, that depends. But many times I'll try to find an excuse to turn the prospect over to the sales manager or another salesman.
What kind of excuses do you mean?
Again, that depends on each prospect, Ed, but I try to pick out something in the presentation in which he was particularly interested and suggest that I would like the sales manager to go into it in more detail.
How does this work out, Jim?
It's saved many a sale. Somewhere along the line, I may have fallen out of step with the prospect. Maybe he just doesn't want to buy from me. Well, there could be any number of reasons, Ed. But another man with a different approach may turn the trick and close the sale.
Well, gentlemen, it seems to me that we've brought out several good ways to handle the prospect who wants to hesitate. Jim mentioned giving the prospect reasons why now is the best time to buy and reviewing the presentation. And if the prospect does leave, follow up at his home within a few days. If you can't discover why the prospect is hesitating, turn him over to your sales manager or another salesman. Now, so far, we haven't touched on the appraisal or price as it's involved in the close. Bob, how do you handle these?
Ed, I have a certain way of handling this, which the rest of you may or may not agree with. Well, for one thing, I never discuss the appraisal until I've had a chance to give the prospect a demonstration ride. I want him to be thinking about the new Rambler, not about how much his old car is worth. If I allow it to go the other way, it may end up as if I'm buying his old car, rather than with him buying a new car.
How do you keep it from going the other way, Bob?
Well, one of the rules I follow is to never discuss the price or appraisal until I have the prospect sitting down.
Why is that, Bob?
Well, maybe somebody else could give you a scientific reason for it, Ed, but I've just found that prospects are more likely to buy when they're sitting down. It's easier to figure sitting down, and it's harder for the prospect to walk out. Now, let's take the prospect who comes in with a competitive lowball. What I'll do is sit down with him and show him how Rambler's initial cost difference becomes a price advantage when it's balanced against Rambler's savings in insurance, operating costs, and depreciation. Another thing I do is to always seem pleased and surprised by the size of the allowance for every prospect's car. I think we all know that no prospect is ever allowed as much as he thinks his car is worth. My attitude helps to keep him satisfied.
What do you do if the prospect thinks the difference is too great to move into a new Rambler?
Well, the first thing I try to decide is whether he really thinks that, or whether he's using that as an excuse. And I've found that most of the time it is an excuse. Now, let's suppose he seemed to be interested in gasoline economy. Well, with Rambler, it isn't very hard to sit there and show him how the amount of money he will save in gasoline and repairs will more than equal the difference between what he thinks he ought to pay and the actual cost.
Just how do you go about that, Bob?
Well, I find out how many miles he drives, what kind of mileage he gets on his present car, and we get a cost figure to operate his old car for a year. Then, I simply show him how much Rambler will save him. In fact, I try to point out that by buying Rambler, he'll be saving money in addition to getting a car that he will really be happy with.
Well, gentlemen, all of these seem to be very good points. Talk price only when you're sitting down. Be happy with the appraisal. Sell Rambler. Don't buy the used car. Prove prove the advantages of Rambler. All of you men are experts at selling Rambler, and you all have your own ways of going about it. But in listening to you, I wonder if there aren't a couple of special things you all have in common. All of you are convinced that you're selling the best car going. You're all enthusiastic about Rambler. You all believe in Rambler. You all know you can sell Rambler because you know people want Rambler. Even with all of your skill and experience, I'm sure you'd all agree that you wouldn't do very well without this conviction and enthusiasm. After all, very few prospects simply buy, except from Elmer. They have to be sold. Sold by you. Yes, no matter how much a prospect is pre-sold by advertising and public opinion, he still has to be sold. And I'm sure we can all agree that the close is in the selling. Every step of the selling, from the beginning to the end. A prospect may want Rambler, but he buys Rambler because of you.
I hope.